Daf Ches Amud Beis will begin Daf Ches Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the bottom, the beginning of the Gemara. Zok the Gemara, Taman Tanina, we learned in a Mishnah and Shabbos, Mefanim Afilu Arba v'Chamesh Kupais. We can clear away from an area 4 or 5 boxes. If it's needed for guests or for people to learn, for the Talmidim to learn, even though it's a tircha, but for the Dvar Mitzvah, we allow this tircha on Shabbos to clear away 4 or 5 boxes to create an open area for the guests or the Talmidim. Rabbi Zera shal es Rabbi Yosha, he asked the following question: Kamu shiurin shal kupais. When we say boxes, what are the sizes of the boxes? Amrle, he answered him, he said, let's also let's learn out something which is salsam, which is not defined, from a case which is mafurish, which is defined. The sign we learned in the Brisa, Bishloish, Kupais, Shal Shalosh Shalosh Soyin, Shem Tisha Soyin, Shem Eser V'Sheva Soyin, Terminus Alishka. So as we learned in our Mishnah, the Brisa elaborates, it says, your term, the Lishka, we withdraw from the Lishka, from the treasure chamber, 3 boxes, 3 times a year. So now the 3 boxes, each box contained 3 saw. So therefore, at each interval, there were 3 boxes of 3 saw. That's 9 saw. And it was done 3 times a year. Times 3 is 27. So a total of 27 sawim. So with the total of 27 sawim, term the salishka. The cost of alayim, al beis gimel, and they were labeled. The boxes were labeled al beis gimel, meaning that first they had to withdraw from the first box, and then from the second, from the third. Mibnei ma cost of alayim al beis gimel. Why were they labeled? Why were they labeled al beis gimel? First, you complete the shkolim there in the first box. When that's emptied, when that's finished, you go to the second. When that's finished, you go to the third. You don't jump from one to the other. It's a bizoyan for the mitzvah to not complete it and to go on to something else. So the first one that came into your hand is the first box. That one is completed first. So what do we learn from here? What do we see from here? That the box is 3 saw. Therefore, we can learn also in the case of the Mishnah Shabbos, when it says that mafanim, the kupais, each box can contain up to 3 saw. Taman Tanina, we learned there also the Masechet Shabbos Hamoitzi Yain Kedei Masechet Shekalim. What is a shear for Haitzah from wine? A person is chayiv for chayiv achatav, so he carries out, if he does a malach of Haitzah, if it's like a shear, if it has at least the minimum shear. What is the minimum shear for Haitzah, for carrying for wine? That is Kedei Masechet Shekalim. That's the amount of pure wine that's used to mix with water to have a Masechet Shekalim, to have diluted wine. So the practice that they had normally was to take pure wine, raw wine, and dilute it with water. It's the amount of the pure wine that would be used to form a cup of diluted wine that was mixed with water to have a cup of diluted wine. So the question is, Rabbi Zera shal as Rabbi Yosha kamishim shel kais. Well, and what is that measurement? What is the kais that we're talking about? Amrle said, Nilmas also minaforish. So again, in the similar vein, let's learn salsa minaforish from where it says it explicitly. The Tanya Rabbi Chia taught in this following Bryce Legabi the Dalit cases of Pesach, Arba cases Shamrud, 4 cases that they mentioned, Yeshan Revia, Shalyain Vitalki. That the 4 cases have together a revias of Yain el Talki, of that type of wine. So therefore, each kais contained a quarter of revias of pure wine. Together, they formed a revias of this wine, meaning each kais was a quarter. There's 4 kaises, it was a quarter of pure wine. So therefore, you see the shiur for Haitzah is a quarter of a revias. The normal ratio of diluting would be 1 part and then 3 parts. But you see over here that the pure wine would be a quarter of a revias, and then they would dilute it with water. This that we just mentioned, that's the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Ditani, because we learned in a brisa, mayim, what's the shear of hitzah for water? Mayim kedei gemir. It's enough to swallow, to gulp at one time. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kedei loshav behen as a killer. He says the shiur for water is the amount of water that normally will be mixed with this eye ointment. They mix it with powder, water with a certain powder to make this salve for the eye. The amount of water that would be needed to mix it with this killer, to mix it with the salve. Yayin, how much? What's the share for yayin for wine? Can they give me the amount to gulp down? But Rabbi Yehuda says mezigas akais, the amount of pure wine that would be diluted with water to have the kais. So you see, the Mishnah in Shabbos is the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Mozug bekama, what's the share of hitzah for diluted wine? How much of that liquid is a person chayiv if he carries out on Shabbos nashmenado? Let's learn it out from the brisa that we just mentioned. It says, "Ma'im kedei gemia, water to gulp it down." Rabbi Yehuda omer kedei loshav b'mes killer, to mix it with the killer. Yayin kedei gemia, yayin to swallow. Rabbi Yehuda omer kedei mezekas akais. He says the amount of yain is that you would mix it and have with water the amount of pure wine that you would mix to have a kais with a diluted wine that's mixed with water. So therefore you can learn out from here that the amount of diluted wine is mezigas hakais. Now, the amount of pure wine is the amount that you would use to mix with the water. The normal ratio of dilution of mixing the water with pure wine is 3 parts water, 1 part wine. So therefore, if you're saying that it's the amount of wine that would be used to have a kais, that you have mezigas kais, so is the amount of pure wine that you use, that means is that you would have the kais itself would be a revius, because you'd have 3 times as much water as the wine, and therefore you'd have the kais would be a revius. Common shir and shel kaisa is, now we talked about the kais shel pesach. What's the shir of kaisa? Is Ravav and Amar titatra and revia. So to translate it into the types of measurements that they had at that time, which were more common at that time, he says it's a tirtartan and a quarter. A tirtartan is slightly less than a revius, so a tirtartan plus a quarter is the equivalent of the shear for the dalet kaisis. Can you drink the 4 kaisis at one time without intervals? The Chazal Masakin dalet kaisis, the Masakin keneged dalet shenish geula. Do they have to be drunk separately, or can you drink it at one interval, one right after the other? So the answer is Midamar Rabbi Mon Amar Yaisi. Well, you can learn it from what Rabbi Mon said in the name of Rabbi Yaisi. Halal im shama basic Knesses yasam. That if a person heard the Hallel in the Beis Knesses on Pesach night, he's Yaitza, and he does not have to recite it again during the Seder. Even that means that he will not have an interruption between the 3rd and 4th kaisis. He'll be drinking together, he's Yaitza. Therefore, you see that you don't need a separation between the kaisis. You can learn out from there that if he drank it together, and he drank it one after the other without separating them, without a hefsek between them, then he is Yaisa. Can't he drink the cups, zip the cups? Or does he have to drink each kais? Does he have to drink it at one time? Do we say that he has to show more chavivas to the kais and drink it all at one time, or can he sip it separate intervals, sipping it bit by bit? So the more answers Klum Amra Elashish, the Chachamim, and they were Machayev, they made a takana that you have to drink the kaisis. And not that he becomes a shaker. So therefore, if he does it and drinks it slowly, then he won't be intoxicated. So therefore, you could be yaitz in that manner, and it's zikr that you could be yaitz in that manner because it prevents him from being mishtakir, which in the other way, if he drinks it at one time, he's more likely to be. Ma'olatzis b'yayin shel shvius. Can a person be yaitse with wine of shvius? The wine that was produced from grapes of the Shemitah year, which is mutter, but after the Zman HaBiur, or after the Zman HaBiur, it's also Bahana. Can it be yaitse with the Dalek Kaises this? Do we say it's also Bahana, you can't, or do we say Mitzvah's Lav Lahanis Nitnu? The being yaitse of the mitzvah is not considered deriving any personal benefit, and therefore he could. Tani Rav Aishia yaitse b'yayin shel shvius. He says it's mutter. You could be yaitse. Maul, Allah says bekondita. Can be yaitse with wine that's spiced, and has spices and honey. Can be yaitse with that type of wine. With that flavored wine, is that really considered to be wine? So midatani bar kabara kondita kiyayin. He says it's considered like wine. Is considered like it's like regular wine. Although you can learn out from there that you could be yaitse with the yain of konditin. Ma says behind mazugin can be yaitse with diluted wine, with wine that's diluted. So the Gemara was not one who asked the question was not aware of the brisa that we brought down earlier. So he answered me that Rabbi Chia arba kaitze shamro yaitze behem bein chayin uvein mezukin. He says you can be yaitze whether they're undiluted or diluted. Ulavad sheyeh tam umara yain. They have the taste and the color of wine, meaning the undiluted can't have such a bitter, strong, sour taste that it doesn't taste like wine. And the diluted can't be so diluted that it doesn't have the flavor of wine, and it has to have the color of wine. So as long as it does, you can be yaitse. So you see that you can be yaitse with diluted wine. Amar Rav Yirmiyah mitzvah lotzes b'yayin adam. He says that it's a mitzvah and a muvcha to be yaitse with wine that's red. Shenemar al teira yayin ki is adam ki yitain b'kois einai. Don't person. It's the pasuk is saying is the mishlei that the eitzah to keep away from overindulging in wine. So it says don't look at wine. Don't set your sights on wine, on red wine. So this will cause a harm to the person. So you see, the yain meshubach, what we praise in the wine is red wine. Tanai we learn the brayso mevushal kimetubal. That cooked wine is like spiced wine. So there's a difference, opinions in Rishonim legavi what it is mentioned, what is in the Geya, which halacha, and the Rash Shirilo says it's Geya to the din of Mizbeach, just like you cannot be yaitse with the metubal on the Mizbeach, you can't be yaitse with mavushal, a cooked wine for the yain for the Nesachim on the Mizbeach either. What about for the Dalit Kaises? Can be yaitse with yain mavushal. Amar Rav Yaina yaitse yain mavushal. You could be yaitse with yain mavushal. Rav Yaina letamei. The Rav Yaina can have a shalsei arba kasa de pischa. Rav Yaina, when the wine was bothered him so much that when he drank the 4 kaises on Pesach, have a chazek reisha ad chaga, he would have a headache. His head would hurt him until Shuas. So therefore, when he said the letamei yain mavushal, the mavushal of the wine, it takes away the effect. It reduces some of the effects of the wine, of the harmful after effects of the wine. So therefore, mavushal is preferable because it won't bother him so much. It's more derech eretz. So it's regainer letamei that he could be yaitse lemaisa. In halacha, we say lachatchila, it is better to have yain which is not mavushal. Chamisa chad maternisa apoy nihirin. A certain chamisa noblewoman saw Rav Yehuda Bar Eloi that he had hundreds upon him. That he had a point here. He had hundreds upon him. Amr, she said to him, Saba Saba, you look so bright and happy and radiant. You must have one of 3 things must be by you. Or that you're drunk with wine, you lend money with ribis, meaning you're very wealthy without having to work, or you raise a chazer, which also is a type of profitable parnosa, and you don't have to work too hard with it. Amrullah, he said to her, he said that he mentioned to her, that this woman, that you should have tsar from it, because none of this applies to me. The Chada Milen Tlasa, the Chada Milen Tlasa Leslie, the lesbi. So not one of these three things are applicable to me. So why do I have such hadras panim? Ela ulpanei shechali. He says, because I have my learning. My learning is accessible to me, and that gives me the hadras panim. The hachiksiv chachmas adam tayir panim. The chachma of a person, that gives him hadras panim, that gives him radiance. So that's the reason for it. Rabbi Abo also came to Tveria. Chamuni Talmid of Rabbi Yochanan Apoinoher. The Talmid of Rabbi Yochanan saw him, and he had hadras panim. Amud Yomi Masechet Shekalim. They told Rabbi Yochanan, must be that Ravo found a treasure. He has such a radiance. Also, Rabbi Yochanan came to him and he said, he said he understood Rabbi Yochanan that the hadras panim comes from the Torah that he had. So he said, what treasure? He said, what new learning did you come upon? Amarle Tosefta Tika. He said, I came upon an old Tosefta and something that he didn't know before, and that gave me the hadras panim. Korala, Rabbi Yochanan applied to him the pasuk Chachmas Adam Toyer Ponov. The Chachma of an Adam will give him a brightness face. Amar Vichanin Luga Doraisa. He said the Luga Doraisa is equivalent to Tumnasa Tika Dumaraisa de Tzipari. It's equivalent to the measure that was used, the Tumnasa Tika, the old Tumnasa that was used to measure fish, the fish fat in Tzipari. That was the measurement that they were more familiar with. Amar Rav Yoini, he says, he says, remember this Keli, the base Rav Yanai Hava Machilim Badvash, in the household of Rav Yanai, they used to measure honey with it.